Good evening, Scottish Fold fans. Argyle is finally here, and for those of us who've been really keen to see Henry Cavill in a James Bond-esque role in a big-budget spy thriller adventure film, well, we'll always have the man from U.N.C.L.E. So yes, Argyle was announced, and indeed started filming way back in 2021. It is now the start of 2024, so this film has been sat on the shelf at Apple for a good long while before finally being released, and anecdotally, what I had heard was that a part of the reason why this thing was taking so long to release was because the studio had differing opinions, perhaps, on how best to market this film, and now having seen the film, I can totally understand why. Going back to the very first announcements that this thing was being released, this was, up until I saw that first trailer, this, to me, was Henry Cavill as Argyle in Argyle, so therefore that brings about certain expectations. I think, okay, Henry Cavill is the titular spy character. This is gonna be like James Bond, like Kingsman, like he's gonna be the lead spy on an adventure, which I thought was quite brave, really, because when they released those initial images of him in character with the velvet Nehru jacket and the hair, I mean, it's a striking image, and I do remember the internet responding somewhat in kind.
What have they done to you?
And then I saw the first trailer for the film not that long ago since I'm recording this, and I was really surprised when Henry Cavill wasn't in it all that much, and it seemed to all be about Bryce Dallas Howard.
Oh my god, you're Ellie friggin' Conway.
Author of Argyle series, Ellie Conway!
And then I start reading just very brief synopses of what the film is about, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think that this was a thing. Just for instance, the plot synopsis on IMDb reads, a reclusive author who writes espionage novels about a spy agent and a global spy syndicate realizes the plot of the new book she's writing starts to mirror real-world events in real time. Comparing that with the plot synopsis that's on the official Apple website for the film, the spy thriller Argyle follows the globe-trotting adventures of a super spy named Argyle across the US, London, and other exotic locations. One of these is not like the other. And again, just from a marketing standpoint, I look at the film's ensemble cast poster. Henry Cavill is there in the middle. On all of the posters and promotional material, it's Henry Cavill's name first. Henry Cavill as Argyle in Argyle. The film's trailer was really the only thing that I saw that had me believing that, oh, maybe this film isn't the thing that I've sort of developed in my head, where it is just a Henry Cavill as a James Bond type in a spy adventure. And I do wonder if at some point the marketing was going to be even more misleading, and it was part of the big joke of the thing, that, oh, we've sold you on this Argyle starring Henry Cavill, and it's not actually that at all. Even back when the film was announced, they were doing some kind of funny business with, in the Deadline article, for instance, it says, the film, based on the soon-to-be-launched spy novel Argyle from author Ellie Conway, follows the world's greatest spy Argyle as he is caught up in a globe-trotting adventure. Conway's debut thriller is scheduled to be published in a major launch in 2022 by Transworld Publishers Limited, a division of Penguin Random House. That's in the official announcement for the thing, and Ellie Conway doesn't exist. That's Bryce Dallas Howard's character in the film. So don't get me wrong, I do kind of like subversive marketing like this, you know, blurring the lines between reality and fiction, much like the story in the film does. I think that there is something quite cute about it. That being said, I feel like the marketing for the film has kind of one foot in and one foot out of this concept. Like I say, I think the trailers do more or less sell the film as it is, and then all the stuff around it, posters and, you know, interviews that I read, press releases and stuff, they sell a very different film. I did just want to start by talking about that because I do think it's significant, because I don't know if people really know what kind of film they're going to get with this, or at least I didn't. Maybe I have just been too blind to an awful lot of the marketing, but this is Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell in Argyle. I also thought it was kind of interesting, like I say, on all the posters that I've seen, Henry Cavill's name is top. He's first. And I was halfway through the film and he's barely in the film, and I was halfway through the film thinking, like, Henry Cavill must have the best agent in the world if he's gotten away with having top billing on this thing. And then in the credits at the very end of the film, Bryce Dallas Howard's name is first. It's Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, then I think Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, and then Henry Cavill is fifth. So again, just interesting. I think that some of the film's marketing has been kind of misleading as to who the star of the film really is. So yeah, the broad strokes of Argylle is that Bryce Dallas Howard plays a somewhat reclusive author who writes these spy novels, and then she ends up getting taken into a real-world spy adventure via Sam Rockwell's character, and the plot takes various twists and turns, and there's MacGuffins to be found and whatnot. I do think that the story is perhaps somewhat convoluted when you really start thinking about it. There were times when I was watching the film and I was kind of like, I have no idea what people are after here, but that's fine. They're just after the MacGuffin. It's what all the spies want. I'm fine with that. I don't need to know the nitty-gritty details. I'm fine just to roll with this thing and have fun. This is very much a trademark Matthew Vaughn film. It has all of the kind of tropes that you would expect from a film of his. There is the more irreverent sense of humor. There are the ballet-like action sequences. There is I always associate Matthew Vaughn films with a certain artificiality. Like, I think certainly with Kingsman, Kick-Ass is another one I'd put in that bracket, where they take place in a different reality. It's almost like an animated world, just how characters move, how the camera moves. It never even bothers to try to sell you on realism, and that's fine, because I can kind of roll with it. But there are some times where I do feel a little bit like, I don't know if these actors ever actually left the green screen, which can be a problem when it comes to spy thrillers like this, where it's supposed to be a globe-hopping adventure and they're going to various locations and whatnot. But as I say, for the most part, because I came into this with a certain sense of expectation as to what a Matthew Vaughn film would be, it didn't bother me much. Again, I was just kind of happy to roll with it. Also, somewhat of a trademark for his films now is the star-studded cast. I mean, there's obviously Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Henry Cavill, Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, and then there's Dua Lipa's in this, John Cena, Samuel L. Jackson, Richard E. Grant is here in a small role, Ariana DeBose, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Sophia Boutella. There's an awful lot of people in this. Oh, Rob Delaney is in there in a very small, amusing cameo role. And the cast are uniformly excellent, I would say. Like I say, it was a bit of a shock to my system initially that how little Henry Cavill was going to be in this, and it was like, oh wow, this is a film about a spy novelist. But I really like Bryce Dallas Howard, and I think she's really good in this. Her relationship with Sam Rockwell's character plays out really nicely. I think they both have a really nice chemistry. I was very, very pleased with the cast of this film. I think the film has a really awesome soundtrack, and it really comes to life in some of the action scenes. I think you can really tell that that's where Matthew Vaughn's attention is most spent, the kind of the ballet of bullets kind of mentality that all of his action sequences have, and I think that they're really terrific. I think they're funny and interesting and just an absolute blast to watch. So those were a load of positives that I had with the film. It might have given the impression that I overwhelmingly loved this. I'm going to talk about some criticisms that I had, because I don't think that this is as good as Kingsman. I don't think it's as good as the second Kingsman. I don't think it's as good as Kick-Ass. It's maybe on par with the Kingsman for me. I had a okay enough time watching it, and there were certain highlights, but overall, I felt that the film was certainly way too long. I think you needed to trim 20 minutes out of this at least. There were several scenes that I felt just went on for like the same beats would be repeated numerous times, and there's a bit where they're Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell are kind of on a ledge, and he wants her to jump off, and she's afraid of heights and she doesn't want to jump off, and you know, I know how this kind of scene is going to go. She's, you know, it's a bit of funny business because she's all flighty, and he's just like, oh, you need to do it. And they just repeat the same. She's, oh no, I don't want to go. Oh no, you must go. Oh no, I don't want to go. And it's just back and forth of that for, you know, some point I was just in my head just thinking, like, just jump. And I found that quite a common criticism for me throughout the whole thing. I did feel like it was just a bit too repetitive. I also don't really feel like the whole real spy versus fictional spy element of the story worked all that well, because I think that's very rich, fertile ground for some exploration, the idea that this author writes about this larger-than-life, very fantastical, very James Bond secret agent character, and then she is thrust into a real-world secret agent scenario, and she's paired up with Sam Rockwell, who's a bit more of an everyman type of character. I think that there's something in that, and yet because Matthew Vaughn's world is so fantastical and heightened anyway, I don't ever really feel like Sam Rockwell's spy is some, like, John le Carré, grounded George Smiley type. And I bring this up because Matthew Vaughn has talked about this in interviews. I thought, wow, this is going to be fun, juxtaposing the two together. Henry Cavill on the left, Sam Rockwell on the right, and then Bryce in the middle, trying to figure out how the illusion that she's created, the fantasy and the reality, smashed together to create a new genre. I think there's more than just a little bit of hyperbole going on there, because I really don't think that this is a new genre. There was a Sandra Bullock film released like a couple of years ago. I've not seen it, but I remember the trailers for it, and she's like an author who's... Is it John Cena who's in that? Who's in that? Oh, Channing Tatum, right. So it was Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. But that was a film where, you know, she's an author and she's writing about a certain subject, and then she ends up getting wrapped into this whole action, comedy, adventure scenario because of her books. And then there's the Mark Forster film, Stranger Than Fiction. You know, those are just the examples that are springing to my mind right now. There have been, you know, plenty of stories in film and text over the years of authors being thrust into the world in which they write about and meeting the characters or ciphers of the characters that they write about. But I really didn't feel that that juxtaposition worked at all, because the fantasy that she is writing about isn't all that far removed from the reality that she lives in, seemingly. The film takes some seriously silly plot turns in a couple of places, and it even calls itself out on it. There are definitely a couple of moments where something will happen and it'll say like, well, that's really dumb, and it's like, yeah, it is, but here we are, we're gonna roll with it, which I don't mind. I don't mind that self-referential stuff, but yeah, if the intention was to sort of have a real world and fantasy world juxtaposition, then I don't feel like that comes across at all. Perhaps crucially, I didn't really feel like the film was all that funny either. It relies on... There's a cat. They rely on the cat for a lot of the gags, and it'll just be cutting to the cat and meow, and... I'm not a cat person, so maybe that works for people who like cats more than I do. Overall, I thought the film was okay, and if you're a fan of Matthew Vaughn's style, as I suppose I am, because I was like, looking at his filmography, I don't think of myself as a big Matthew Vaughn fan, but Kingsman I like, Kingsman The Golden Circle I like more than most, I love X-Men First Class, I love Kick-Ass, I love Stardust. The only films of his that I really haven't been too keen on up until Argyle have been Layer Cake and The King's Man, and I know that I'm definitely in a minority when it comes to Layer Cake. People love that film. But if you do like his style, then I think you will find something to enjoy in this. I've seen people give it far more scathing reviews than I have, and I can't give it a scathing review because genuinely there were times in it where I was like, oh, I'm having a blast with this, but they were perhaps just a bit too diluted by a overly long running time and a story that was just perhaps a little bit too convoluted for its own good. Also, if you did see this at the cinema, can you let me know if you saw this film in 3D or not? This was really weird. This had never happened to me before. I saw this early on a weekend morning, this film, so it was literally me and two other blokes also just by themselves in the cinema. And just as the film was starting, just as the logos were coming up, one of the ladies that works at the cinema came in and she went by us one by one. And she came up to each of us and said, do you have your 3D glasses? And I was like, what? 3D glasses? I said, the film isn't in 3D, is it? And she said, oh yeah, no, it is. I was like looking at it, and it was just the logos coming up then, so I couldn't really, if the film had started, I could have said, it's not in 3D. But I was like, okay, fine. Because she said, well, I can go and get you some and bring them in. I was like, okay, fine. The film starts, it's definitely not in 3D, but then she arrives back very quickly with the glasses and she hands them all out to us. I put them on, and I'm like, there's nothing. There's no difference, I've just made the screen slightly darker by putting these on. So as much as I was really enjoying that opening action sequence with Henry Cavill and Dua Lipa, I was somewhat distracted by the fact that I was like flicking the glasses up and down to see if there was indeed any difference between my experience of having them on, and there wasn't. So I don't know, maybe a colleague's pulled a prank on her, I don't know. But yeah, let me know if you did see this in 3D. I didn't think, I had a little Google afterwards, I was like, I don't even think you can see this film in 3D, but anyway, do let me know below. I've said that there because I am gonna, just the last few minutes of this video, I'm gonna talk about something that is perhaps spoilery. I think it is quite spoilery, so if you haven't seen the film and you intend on seeing it, please go see it and then come back and finish watching this video, because I just want to talk about what happens at the very end of the film and the mid-credits scene. Okay, so one of the sort of amusing twists at the end of the film is that after all of the convoluted stuff about Bryce Dallas Howard is, you know, writing about herself in the books and she's been brainwashed and all that kind of stuff, she's one of the book launchers, and Henry Cavill stands up in the crowd and it's like, oh my god, Argyle's real, and then there's a mid-credits scene where a teenage Argyle, he is at, I think the pub was called the Kingsman, wasn't it, or something like that, and he gives a secret code and the barman gives him something, and it's all very much implying that, oh, Argyle was a Kingsman? I have to admit, I did somewhat roll my eyes at that. I was very not expecting it either, because I know that the Kingsman films are released by a different studio, so I don't know if, you know, Matthew Vaughn has certain liberties over the Kingsman IP that he can just stick it in a film that's been made by a different studio. But Vaughn does this every time I feel like he has a film out, where when he's on the promotional rounds for it, he'll talk about how he's gonna make 25 more of whatever it is he's promoting, and a lot of the time I don't really feel like it comes to fruition. I remember after the Golden Circle we had sort of, you know, he was talking about, first of all, a Kingsman 3 with Taron Egerton and Colin Firth coming back, and then there was going to be a Statesman spin-off with Channing Tatum, and then he was talking about the prequel film, which did come to fruition in The Kingsman. But none of the other Kingsman films have happened, and I feel like every time he gives an interview, he's talking about, oh, we're going to start filming it later this year, and it just never really happens. So I don't know if the idea is that now Argyle is going to be a part of that. This has all happened in the same universe, and Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell and Henry Cavill are going to come back in a Kingsman film. There's going to be some big crossover. The film did also end with, there was a poster of Argyle, and it said, Argyle Book 1, coming soon. So I guess it's like a little trailer for what's about to come next, but as I say, given Matthew Vaughn's track record of like stuff that actually comes to fruition after he talks about it versus, you know, the reality, I'm not gonna hold my breath on that, particularly when Argyle, you know, this is the weekend of its release. I don't know if public opinion will shift. Actually, yeah, what is the audience score for this? Okay, looks like audience scores are marginally more preferable than critical scores, but not exactly, you know, jumping for joy. Given the box office projections as well, I don't know if Argyle is going to be a huge success theatrically. Maybe it will do an awful lot better when it inevitably ends up on Apple TV in a couple of months. My point is that I don't think we're going to see much more of this unless Henry Cavill does indeed appear in a following, you know, in another Kingsman film, which I think we probably will get at some point. I think we will eventually get the third Eggsy Kingsman film. I hope we get that. I would quite like to wrap up that, you have that as a little trilogy. But so much time has passed. It's been 10 years since the first Kingsman, so I don't know if there's a... Maybe there isn't much of an audience for it anymore. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below, because I feel like everyone really loves that first Kingsman film. Everything that came after it, I think people have just kind of shrugged off and forgotten about. And so when it comes to the mid-credit scene of Argyle, I just can't help but feel it's a slightly futile. I am a bit sick of this. I saw the latest Transformers film last year, The Rise of the Beasts, and that end credits, mid-end credits bit ended with this sort of, you know, hinting at a future crossover or whatever, and I'm just kind of over it. I just don't care. It's just like, oh yeah, whatever, you probably never make it anyway. And on that note, please do let me know your own thoughts on Argyle in the comments section below. Also below, you can click the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button to stay super up to date on future video uploads. And with all that being said, and until next time, Scottish Fold fans, so long for now.